Hello and welcome to ITV News Meridian.
The headlines in the southeast this Monday evening. Michael Stone jailed for the Chillenden murders. His sister tells us she thinks an alleged confession by Levi Belfield proves her brother has been wrongly convicted.
I think, it's a genuine document and I believe the confession to be true.
Tackling the big backlog of NHS operations, the Prime Minister and Chancellor in Maidstone, but questions remain how it's going to be paid for.
Also this Monday evening, the millions needed to restore one of the South Coast's grandest theatres.
And Jubilee celebrations begin to mark an extraordinary reign as we look back at the Queen's links with Churchill and Kent. Good evening. Legal experts are warning serial killer Levi Belfield's alleged confession to the murders of Lynn and Megan Russell in Kent 26 years ago should be treated with extreme caution.
The solicitor for Michael Stone, who's serving a life sentence for the murders, says Belfield's statement changes everything. And tonight, Michael Stone's sister told us that she believes that confession to be proof of a terrible injustice, as John Ryle now reports.
For 26 years, Michael Stone has insisted that his conviction for the murders of Lynn and Megan Russell at Chillenden and the attempted murder of Josie Russell was a miscarriage of justice. But he remains convicted after 2 trials and a High Court appeal. Now the serial killer Levi Belfield has allegedly confessed to the Russell murders in a 4-page statement detailing the attacks. Stone's sister says she's convinced the confession is genuine.
He hasn't just done this at a drop of a hat to be mean in any way. I think he's taken time over it, he's thought about it, he's taken the trouble to get it presented into a document that can be received as evidence, as opposed just to a quick scribble of a note or a brief conversation. So I think, it's a genuine document and I believe the confession to be true.
Stone's solicitor describes the Belfield statement as a game changer.
I think it's a remarkable turn of events. I think it's going to make a huge difference to the case that we've been running for many years, the appeal of Michael Stone, and hopefully it will lead to his being released from prison in the not too distant future.
But today, a leading policing and crime commentator said Belfield's letter should be treated with great caution.
He is a manipulative man, he is a narcissist, an attention seeker, and it may be that by making this alleged confession, he's putting himself back in the news. So I think this alleged confession has to be looked at seriously, but with a great deal of caution, because it's possible that Levi Belfield is in fact lying.
Criminologist Peter Squires, based at Brighton University, says Belfield has a long history of making false confessions.
There was a big investigation, I think in around 2015, when he confessed to murders in about 10 police force areas, but the police ultimately concluded that this was a fabrication. So he's done it before. He's shared time with Michael Stone in Franklin Prison in Durham, and I think it may well be that he is bored, calculating and out to cause mischief.
Belfield's statement will now be passed to the Criminal Cases Review Commission as Michael Stone's lawyers prepare for a fresh appeal.
Well, over to John live outside Kent Police in Maidstone. And John, what are the force saying about these developments this evening?
Well, Kent Police giving no interviews on this today. In a statement, they make no mention of Belfield's alleged confession. They simply restate the history of Michael Stone's multiple failed attempts to clear his name. 2 trials, 2 guilty verdicts, and a failed attempt at a High Court appeal.
And we heard Barbara Stone again pleading for her brother's release. How likely is that? Surely there's lots yet to consider.
Yes, I mean, for Barbara Stone, there have always been very serious doubts about the safety of her brother's conviction, all the more so now, she says, because of this alleged confession. And that statement from Belfield, those 4 pages, will feature big time in any fresh hearing now, any future hearing for Michael Stone, but so will Belfield's long history of making confessions that prove to be entirely false.
John Riley-Mason, as always, thank you. In other news, an Indian restaurant in Essex has been severely damaged in a gas explosion. Several cars were also damaged by the blast, which was reported over the weekend. Pictures from the scene on Southend Road in Grey show debris strewn right across the road. No one was injured.
A man has been jailed in connection with a knife attack in Herne Bay. Mark Edge, who's 53, stabbed his victim in the chest in March 2019. The victim was flown to a London hospital for life-saving treatment. Edge has been sentenced to 5 years.
Dog owners in Kent are being warned to keep their pets under control as lambing season approaches. Last spring, Kent police recorded 29 attacks on livestock, which left many animals maimed and some needing to be killed. Officers are now using DNA swabs to correctly identify any dog responsible for a sheep worrying incident. Now, the Prime Minister has been in Kent today visiting Maidstone Hospital. He outlined some of the government's plans to deal with the huge NHS backlog.
Well, alongside him was the Chancellor Rishi Sunak. He's the bookies' favourite to take over if Mr Johnson is brought down by his MPs. Well, live to our political correspondent Phil Hornby. And Phil, this wasn't the big announcement about the NHS we've been expecting, was it?
No, it wasn't, Luke, and we do need that big announcement. 6 million people are waiting for operations and so on, and that number's growing all the time. But when Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak turned up at Maidstone Hospital today to visit the cancer centre there, they didn't have the big plan to unveil. According to the government, it is still being worked on. We did get some bits and pieces, more challenging targets for cancer diagnosis and treatment, and a new website that should enable patients to shop around for speedier treatment.
If you are due for an operation or any other treatment, and you look around and you can see that you could get that treatment, that operation faster at somewhere like this place, for instance, which has low waiting lists and does things fast, then you can take advantage of it and we can use patient choice to try to drive down waiting lists as well.
But where was the big plan? The Health Secretary said today the arrival of Omicron in December has slowed down work on the plan. But others say it's been blocked by the Treasury, by Rishi Sunak. Some think he might be playing politics ahead of a possible Tory leadership election. Certainly that's what Labour think. This is how they characterised the Maidstone visit.
A photo op without a plan. Their own NHS recovery plan, just another cancelled operation. It's pretty obvious it's about Treasury reluctance to rescue the Prime Minister. Is this where the shambles of the Conservative Party have taken us?
Meanwhile, Phil, the South East's newest MP arrived at the Commons today.
Yes, another Conservative MP, Anna Firth, who won the Southend West by-election last week. She took her first steps inside the Commons chamber this afternoon. She's wanted to be an MP for a long time. She wanted to stand in Rochester and Strood. She did stand in Canterbury, and then finally she was elected in Southend West and took the oath in the House of Commons this afternoon.
I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, her heirs and successors, according to law, so help me God.
And still here, all eyes are on Conservative MPs to see if they're going to support a no-confidence vote in Mr Johnson. I suspect Anna Firth will not be among them.
OK, Phil, live in Westminster. Thank you.
Now, a petition against changes to how long women wait between smear tests has gone viral on social media, attracting more than 1 million signatures.
Well, the time between screenings for cervical cancer is being extended in Wales and Scotland, prompting concerns that the same could happen here. But experts say it's because the tests are now far more accurate, as Lauren Hall reports.
It's one of the most preventable and treatable types of cancer. And that's why cervical screenings are so important.
Smear tests are a quick and simple procedure which are carried out in your local GP surgery.
Now, at the moment, they're done every 3 years for those aged between 25 and 49, and that goes up to every 5 years for those aged between 50 and 64. Soon, though, that interval between screening tests could be extended to 5 years for everyone. It caught the attention of Rachel Hibbard from Brighton, who was diagnosed with cell changes following a smear test. She's concerned about the new proposal.
I think that they need to ramp it up. We need to keep on telling people they need to go for their smears, and by changing it to 5 years, I think maybe it's going to get overlooked, get forgotten about.
The UK National Screening Committee recommended the change in timescale because of a change in the smear test. Samples taken from the cervix are now tested for HPV, the human papillomavirus. It causes virtually all cases of cervical cancer and can be detected long before we detect any abnormal cells. So if a sample tests negative for HPV, that person's seen as very low risk, hence not testing again for 5 years. If HPV is present, that person would be invited back sooner or referred for other tests.
All the scientific evidence tells us that doing cervical screening this way round saves more lives than how we were doing it previously. Because doing the HPV primary test, where we look at the infection first before the cells, is a much better way of predicting risk, we're more able to see who needs treatment and who doesn't.
Although not everyone's convinced. Destiny Wade's cervical cancer was picked up late after the pandemic delayed her smear test. She's backing a petition against the proposal, which now has over 1.2 million signatures.
There's women like myself that feel extremely strongly if we had had our smears when we were meant to have them or earlier, or we had a better detection, then we wouldn't have been in the situation we are. It just seems crazy to me that they would even consider making these changes, knowing how beneficial they actually are to our lives.
It's already being implemented in other parts of the UK, but not in England, and we don't know whether it will be in the future. This GP is keen to remind people that they never need to wait if they have any concerns.
Screening appointments are scheduled appointments. That doesn't take away from the fact that if you spot any signs of postcoital bleeding, of pain, of any other symptoms that you're not happy about, you still have access to your GP and you still will be called in to be tested or to have a smear test done.
Whatever happens to the time between screenings, doctors say the most important thing is people keep attending them, giving them the best chance against cervical cancer. Lauren Hall, ITV News.
Good advice there while you are watching ITV News in the Meridian region. Thank you very much for joining us. Lots more to come, including a campaign to bring this theatre by the sea back to life, but with a hefty price tag.
And 70 glorious years, the Queen's linked to Chartwell and the first of her 14 Prime Ministers.
Well, of course, for more on all of our stories, do go to itv.com/Meridian. You can also give us a ring. The number, as always, 0808 1010 095. And remember, you can also follow us on Facebook and on Twitter.
And the ITV Evening News Hour continues with the national and international news at 6:30. Here's Mary Nightingale.
Coming up in the programme, why has a plan to tackle England's huge NHS backlog been delayed? The Prime Minister has denied it stands for rift with the Chancellor and promises he will tackle waiting lists. Also ahead, exam help for the class of 2022. We'll have the details. Can neighbours be saved after Channel 5 dumped the classic soap? Join me for that and more at 6:30.
We certainly will. Now, the stars that have crossed its stage are almost too many to mention, from Sammy Davis Jr. to the Beatles and Laurel and Hardy. Yet today, the Brighton Hippodrome remains in ruin.
But all hope is not yet quite lost, as developers who took over a year ago are now trying to save and transform it, even at this desperate last hour.
However, it's not the only theatre at risk in our region. That list having grown by a third over COVID, and now including Margate's Theatre Royal, the Roundhouse in Dover, the Tameside in Thurrock and Clare Hall in Haywards Heath. Well, with more on all of this, here's Andy Dickinson.
Like the dressing room once used by Charlie Chaplin, the Brighton Hippodrome has certainly seen grander days.
We are now coming up to the ceiling of the Hippodrome.
A forest of scaffolding currently keeping it from collapsing, it remains top of the list of the country's theatres at risk.
We just want the Brighton public and visitors to be able to interact with it as much as possible. We want to, it's got an amazing history for the different types of entertainment that have taken place here. You've had the Beatles, the Stones, all these amazing entertainers from a musical background, from a theatrical background that have performed here, and we want to allow that to happen again.
Derelict for close to 2 decades, this building was once a marvel of the English stage that saw Olivier's debut performance. Later becoming a circus and an ice rink, it's since been planned as a cinema, restaurant and hotel, all to no avail. The current model, a theatre transformed with a hotel attached.
The new developers here have secured the roof, which we understood was going to fall, effectively fall in, and we'd lose the place forever, really. So, they put their money where their mouth is, and we've now got a place under development. It's going to take time, but at least it's now safe, and in the hands of somebody that appears to actually care about it. It could be the jewel in the crown of Brighton.
Looking at this scene, it's hard to imagine that Laurel and Hardy, the Beatles, even Houdini trod these boards. The question is now, will anyone ever grace this stage again?
The lack of ventilation and the water penetration over the years has led to the ceiling here really degrading, and with each part that falls, as you can see over here, it sort of drags down another piece. It's a bit like dominoes, and so the more that falls, the harder the challenge is going to be to save the building.
Some theatres closed during COVID and weren't able to reopen. And the sector still is in a very fragile state. Lots of theatres have low reserves. We're waiting for audience confidence to rebuild. It's patchy across the country. But once you've lost that theatre, it's gone. And we need to kind of look at the longer term benefit of those theatres as community spaces, and importantly, the economic impact as well. Local businesses benefit from there being a theatre in the area.
So you'd move each light individually?
With a budget of £10 million and dreams of opening in 2 years, £1 million here has already been spent. Hopes as high as they've been for some time that this Grade 2 star-listed masterpiece could yet survive. Andy Dickinson, ITV News, Brighton.
Now, safe to say, no one alive today in Britain will witness another Platinum Jubilee. The 70th anniversary of the Queen's accession this weekend was an historical event never before achieved in this country.
Well, the King's Troop Royal House Artillery fired a gun salute in Green Park at midday, and the Honourable Artillery Company performed at the Tower of London an hour later in the first of many events to mark the milestone between now and June. That's when the official celebrations will be held.
Yes, and earlier at Chartwell in Kent, the home of the Queen's first Prime Minister, Sir Winston Churchill, the anniversary was marked with a tree planting. The Japanese ambassador on hand to see a cherry tree planted in sight of Sir Winston's study there throughout her long reign. Her Majesty has seen many Prime Ministers come and go, a total of 14 in fact.
But it's rumoured that her favourite was Sir Winston. And now at his family home in Kent, there's a special exhibition of photographs revealing their long and close friendship. Malcolm Shaw has the story.
Sir Winston took an important part in the ceremonies attending the coronation and has probably been nearer to the sovereign than any Prime Minister for many years.
Sir Winston Churchill welcomes the Queen to Downing Street on his last night as Prime Minister. They first met when she was a child. He was impressed even then by what he called her air of authority and reflectiveness, and the admiration was mutual. Now at Chartwell, Sir Winston's former family home in Kent, a special exhibition explores their remarkable friendship. It's being staged to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee.
The accession to the throne of Her Majesty the Queen meant that she had Winston Churchill as her Prime Minister, and that was following his re-election in the 1950s. And so he was not only an elder statesman figure, he was a direct counsel and advisor to her in the early years of her reign. There's a photograph in the exhibition where the Queen and Sir Winston Churchill are waiting for the Queen Mother to return from an international trip. And so the pair are just chatting, and you've got Prince Charles and Princess Anne stood by the Queen. And it's really obvious, just from the way they are in relaxed conversation, how at ease the pair were each other. So I think that's a really special personal moment between the two, captured on camera.
The Queen was just 25 when she came to the throne. Churchill had already served 5 monarchs before her and led the country through the dark days of World War II.
He loved the Queen, and I mean, it's not a disrespectful thing to say that he really believed it was the dawn of a new era, that it was the second Elizabethan era. It was the first time after the war that Britain kind of shed her wartime clothes, as it were. It was a great, joyful state occasion, the coronation. And I think his relationship with the Queen was as close as it was possible to be.
Despite their close friendship, there's no record of the Queen ever visiting Chartwell, but on his desk in the library, Sir Winston proudly displayed photographs of her parents and the monarch herself on her coronation day.
Chartwell is a place that really tells the stories of Churchill's life and the family's loves and passions and personal interests. And so to have mementos that also incorporate the monarch in that, the monarchy was something really important to him that he believed in, and he did serve 6 monarchs in his lifetime. So to see those mementos still here and chosen to be on display for visitors really shows, I think, the importance to him personally of that relationship in his life and the influence on him.
My grandfather had the most profound respect, admiration and love for the institution of the monarchy, and he believed that it was the monarchy, the golden thread which held the whole union together, and I think that's as true today as it was in those days.
The Queen and Mr. Churchill, as the infant's godparents, attend the christening of Harriet Elizabeth.
Once asked which of her prime ministers she most enjoyed meeting, the Queen replied, Winston, of course, because it was always such fun. The exhibition, called Churchill and the Crown, runs until the 27th of February. Malcolm Shaw, ITV News, Chartwell.
Beautiful photos and a beautiful place. I've always wanted to go to Chartwell. It's on my bucket list. A beautiful place. I'd like to move in. Do you think they'll let me?
Maybe.
I'd quite like to live there. I could see me there living at Chartwell. It'd be very nice. We'll talk about beautiful pictures. Beautiful Holly has joined us now. I'm talking about the beautiful Northern Lights, something else I'd like to see.
Yes, lots of the country over the last few days have been seeing the Northern Lights. So I thought we could take a look at the beautiful sights that we have missed out on. Okay.
Wow. That's a shame.
I know how to start a weather chat.
Yeah,
okay, let's take a look at this first one.
That's
This came in from Lossiemouth, Alan Butterfield, Northern Scotland. Gorgeous colours,
Doesn't
aren't
look
they?
real.
No,
it
I know,
doesn't.
amazing.
Amazing.
Come a little bit further south, we've got Northumberland, taken by Owen Humphreys. Come a bit further south again, and in Norfolk, Gary
it's coming our way.
It's coming our way, but guess what it didn't do? It didn't actually come our way, so it got very close, but sadly didn't quite make it to us. But lovely elsewhere in the country.
Yeah.
Well, I know they're called Northern Lights for a reason, but would we ever see them down here?
You can do. It is unusual, but lots of people ask me why we don't see them more often. And it's to do with, well, how they work. So you get them because on the sun you can get these solar flares which send big clouds of charged particles our way. And they can head in lots of different directions, but when they do head to Earth, they interact with our magnetic field, which draws them to the North and the South Pole, where they interact with gases in our atmosphere. So if they interact with oxygen, you get green colours, with nitrogen you get purple colours, but that activity does mainly take place around the poles. You need a really big active storm for those colours to come as far south as us. But as I say, it can happen on very rare occasions.
So I might one day see it in Margate, you never know.
Well,
So you're not ruling it out?
I'm ruling it out for tonight though, yeah, not tonight, but maybe one day.
Okay, so no Northern Lights in the forecast, but let's see what is in store for the week ahead. Here's Holly.
Feels like home, whatever the weather. Valent Boilers and Heat Pumps sponsors ITV Meridian Weather.
A milder look this evening and tonight than we saw last night. A lovely bright start this morning, but cloud has tended to thicken. Still, I think some spells of sunshine to be had for tomorrow. But we do see some rain arriving for the middle of the week. I think probably some patchy bits and pieces on Wednesday, something a bit more organised on Thursday, before brightening up come Friday. So we've had a warm front bringing milder air. We've got this weather front in the vicinity through Wednesday and Thursday, as I say, possibly bringing some livelier rain on Thursday. Before it clears through, high pressure builds in for the tail end of the working week, and that should give us some sunshine, although by that stage we do find ourselves in a chillier air mass as well. Out there at the moment then, in general, more cloud feeding in on this southwesterly breeze, thick enough in places to give an odd shower or two, but most of the night is largely dry. Some clear spells around, but nonetheless a good bit milder than last night. I think temperatures typically around 7, 8, 9 degrees, although some spots perhaps a little bit lower, but either way, a frost-free start to our Tuesday morning. Tuesday then, I think a fairly bright day, spells of sunshine to be had. We have got this southwesterly breeze, which you'll probably notice, especially into the coast there, same direction as today. Temperatures though, getting up to double figures, I think mostly, so it is mild for the time of year, despite that breeze. Our high tide times, we've got Hastings at 3:28 and again at 3:59 into the afternoon. And here's the outlook. So I think more cloud around through Wednesday and Thursday, perhaps some patchy rain on Wednesday, more of it on Thursday. After that, though, higher pressure builds in, so we should see some sunshine as we head towards the end of the working week, but with some chillier nights as well. Take care.
Valent sponsors ITV Meridian Weather.
So no northern lights, but maybe some sunshine, which would be a big
bad.
plus. Now, in just a moment, the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale. Luke will have your late news, so make a date with him a bit later on.
Just after 10:30, but from all of us here, thanks so much for your company, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.